Good afternoon to you all.
Of South Nansha do not target or impact any country, and China does not intend to pursue militarization, said the statement. As we know, since 2016, the statement I just read was published in 2015. China has been expanding continuously its military presence in the South China Sea, especially around the Scarborough Shoal, which is claimed by both China and the Philippines. But the latter has been present for many years. In 2016, a permanent court of arbitration in The Hague, in the Netherlands, ruled that China's expansion had no basis under international law to occupy these islands. We have watched since countless actions by Chinese coast guards and vessels against Filipino vessels particularly. But President Marcos, the current president of the Philippines, has reacted strongly, among different things, by strengthening ties with the United States. Meanwhile, in the Korean Peninsula, relations between Seoul and Pyongyang have deteriorated furthermore over the past 5 years. North Korea's nuclear and ballistic programs are on the rise, threatening peace in Northeast Asia. A redistribution of cards has taken place, with North Korea under Kim Jong-un getting closer to Russia and, of course, to China, but they have been close to China for a long time. While South Korea has started a rapprochement with Japan under the auspices of the Biden administration. And we will not talk too much in this debate about the situation in the Taiwan Strait, but we could. We will not talk about the East China Sea between Japan and China. We could. We will just scratch the surface, as one says, because there's so much to say about this region and about this topic. My name is Philippe Le Corre. I'm a professor of geopolitics at ESSEC Business School, and I'm also a senior fellow with the Asia Society, which is a global organization based in the US, but with 16 centers around the world, including one in the Philippines and one in Korea. So I'm glad to have my colleagues. I will introduce all of them very soon, and I'm so delighted to moderate this debate with a stellar panel. And thank you very much for being here. So let me introduce them since they are a stellar panel, in order of appearance. Ambassador Delia Albert, sitting in the middle, is a former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines, and a former chairperson of the United Nations Security Council, and also Director General of ASEAN. Who knows what ASEAN is? Raise your hands. Right, so we've got some work, you know, we've got some work, Delia. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So you're lucky to have the former Director General of ASEAN. She can tell you a great deal about it. Sitting next to me, Professor Eunjung Lim. Thank you for being here. Eunjung is a professor of international relations at Kongju University in Korea, in the Republic of Korea, and an expert of regional issues and also relations between the United States and Northeast Asia. And last but not least, Dr. Bates Gill, who has held numerous positions in Asia, in the United States, in Australia, in Europe, running multiple think tanks and academic organizations, all related to Asia, to security. He's the author of many books, and he's currently a senior fellow with the National Bureau of Asian Research, among many other positions. So the way it's going to work, I'm going to ask Ambassador Albert first, then Dr. Lim and Dr. Bates, and then we'll keep some time for questions from the room. But first, we're going to have a little debate among ourselves, and we have a few slides, and I will start with Ambassador Albert, and I will start showing the slides whenever you tell me you're ready. Please, Delia.
Bonjour. That's a little French that I learned when I arrived. I'm glad to be here. And yesterday I was a tourist. I went to the Caen Memorial Museum. And in the museum, I saw the effect of the war on Caen and in Europe. In the same museum, I saw the impact of the war in the Asia Pacific. The Philippines was greatly devastated by Second World War, and in history is the second most destructed city in World War II after Warsaw. It made me think how wars are really madness, and I hope that the museum will give the young people, and also not so young people like us, the warning that we should never do it again. It had a great impact on me because I know what war meant to my country in the Philippines, and I saw how devastated Caen was during the Second World War. So for that, as the introduction, I would like perhaps tomorrow to visit the other places in Normandy, because when I told my friends I was coming to France and I was coming to Normandy, everybody knew about Omaha and all those places that are historically known around the world. But to learn from wars, I think it's important for us to know about the world, how the world is behaving, how we are relating to the rest of the world. I think, and I thought that I would introduce you to a part of the world where I come from, and it is a very active region in Southeast Asia, and I think the map is being shown. Just to let you know where I come from, I'm the pink country in the middle, between the Philippine Sea on the right and South China Sea on the left. This is my region. It is a very progressive area because we were able to keep the peace for the past years since the end of World War II. Now, this area of Southeast Asia today is one of the leading economic progressive regions. Why? I think because we were able to maintain the peace, and we always thought with peace come prosperity. And after the war, countries around neighborhood of the Philippines, there are 10 of us, decided that in order to promote peace in the region and ensure prosperity, we should form a group of countries called ASEAN, ASEAN. It's the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And if I will believe the Japanese newspaper yesterday, they said that in less than 10 years, we will overcome total GNP of China, which was a big news for me because I underestimated the progress of that region. Now, on the map, you see the 10 countries of ASEAN. To remember the countries in ASEAN, you must try to think in terms of the alphabet. How did ASEAN come about? It was first formed by 5 countries: the Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. When our leaders got together in 1967, we felt that as neighbors, we should look after each other. We had enough problems with the Second World War, and now we were on the path of making sure that the economies will grow, and economies will grow only if there's peace in the region. So after the 5 countries got together, other countries in the region decided to join us. For example, Brunei, which became a part of ASEAN 2 years after its independence. After Brunei came Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar. So these now, today, are the 10 countries that form ASEAN. We were very active in getting together, getting to know each other, but I think no other region in the world is so diverse as ASEAN. You have Christians in the Philippines, you have the biggest Muslim country in Indonesia, you have the Buddhists in the mainland Asia of Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos, and all other indigenous religions. So you can imagine the diversity in our region. But there's one thing that perhaps I forgot to show you, what makes us get together and what makes us form a good organization together. And if you know the symbol of ASEAN, it's 10 rice stalks. Sorry, it was not in the picture. 10 rice stalks because all of us eat rice 3 times a day. And other countries who wanted to join us said, sorry, you don't eat rice as much as we do. But perhaps the symbol of rice is what keeps us together as a group. And over the years, we are now 57 years old. We have become so linked together and became known not as ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, but people call us the Association of Energetic and Ambitious Nations. Perhaps that's a nicer way to remember ASEAN. So how did ASEAN develop, and why is peace pervasive in our region? We decided that in order to keep peace, we have to relate with our neighbors. We have different ways of linking with our neighbors. And one of our first neighboring country that joined us as a dialogue partner was Australia. At the same time that Australia became a dialogue partner, what is a dialogue partner? It's a country that is interested to do not just political activities, but mainly economic activities with us, as well as to build up more linkages between the two countries. At the same time that Australia became our dialogue partner, the EU, the European Union, decided to join us. So both Australia and the EU became the first dialogue partners of ASEAN. So when you talk about ASEAN 10, it means the 10 member countries of ASEAN. And when you talk about ASEAN and its dialogue partners, you have more than 10 member countries that are our dialogue partners. That includes not only Australia, Canada, China, European Union, India, Japan, New Zealand, Korea, of course, Russian Federation, United Kingdom, and the United States. I have to emphasize that this is a very unique feature of ASEAN. And this has kept us in our relationship with the rest of the world, in not just a small group of 10 countries, but we are linked through our dialogue partnership with other countries. One thing that I think was very important with us is to be able to get our big partners like China, Japan, and Korea to be part of our dialogue partners and became a very important and play a very important role in our political discourse in Asia today. Then we have the sectoral partners. These are countries who decided to be part of our meetings, part of our projects, part of our wider circle of friends around the world. I think this is a unique feature of ASEAN, which no other international organization of this size has maintained such a relationship globally. And then we all have our regional partners in Latin America who also are interested in us because we are, as I said earlier, I think they think and we believe we are such an energetic and ambitious nations. So those are the features of ASEAN which I'm very, very proud of because it has kept peace in the region and it has kept some level of prosperity in our part of the world. Now, earlier we heard about the issues with our neighbors in the region, especially a big neighbor next door. The Philippines being an archipelago is like Indonesia. We are called the Maritime ASEAN. We share a link to other bodies of water in our area. One of them, of course, is the South China Sea. Now, the South China Sea is a huge body of water that is one of the most important bodies of water for trade relations between Asia, Europe, and the rest of the world. 1/3 of global trade goes through the South China Sea. So we believe that we should keep the South China Sea. We should maintain the freedom of navigation so that countries that will deal with not just the ASEAN countries, but with the countries of Korea, Japan, Taiwan, will be able to move freely. However, as suggested and as mentioned earlier, one country in the region in 1947 decided to draw a 9-dash line that will incorporate most of the South China Sea. I think you will see the map. That's the body of water that is today one of the issues of contention. If you look at the sea carefully, you will see the red lines that have been put there since 1947 by China. And all the body of water within that line is claimed by China, which of course we do not agree. We believe that this is an open sea and it should be open to everybody who would like to deal with our region and the region north of us, which includes Taiwan, Korea, and Japan. So before 2016, there were Filipino fishermen who were being disallowed from fishing in the open sea. Many times they were sent back and not allowed to go into this is one of the best fishing grounds in Asia, where you find, this is where the fish breed to multiply, and therefore a very important source of life for all of us in the region. However, in 2012, our ships, our fishermen were told to stay away, and the Philippines decided, we are a small country, we cannot fight a big country, we should go to a court. The Court of Arbitration in The Hague. We brought our case to The Hague, and we said, look, please decide about this 9-dash line that has been set up by China. In 2016, after 3-4 years of court proceedings, the International Arbitration Court decided that there is no such thing as a 9-dash line. It does not exist. And therefore, we should be free to make use of it, not just for us, but other countries of the world that trade with us. So if you read newspapers today, or if you watch television and news, you will hear the 9-dash line, which was put there by China, and which we have brought them to court against and won the case that it does not exist. However, China did not want to respect the court decision, and that's where we have this issue. Meantime, the Philippines, which was a colony of the United States in 1898 after Spanish-American War, established in the Philippines its presence. And during the Cold War, we signed an agreement with the United States that whatever happens to the Philippines is also a responsibility of the United States. So that's why the United States is engaged in this current situation. So I think that should give us some idea of where we are, where we have been, and where we want to go to. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Delia. It was extremely... For these young people to hear all these details about history, about a region they would not hear about on a daily basis, I think is extremely valuable. And let me just add that it's not only the Philippines that wants freedom of navigation, it's also other countries that appear on this map, including Malaysia, Brunei, Vietnam, the island of Taiwan, which I'm sure Bates will allude to. The second thing is that the People's Republic of China in Beijing does not recognize this international arbitration court. Therefore, it says that it is not tied to the decisions. By the way, the United States sometimes also doesn't agree with certain decisions of other courts because it also doesn't feel part of it. So, that's another matter, international law. But let me move to your neighbor, Dr. Lim, and welcome to this panel and welcome to Caen. And perhaps we could now move a little bit north of Asia and talking about this idea of regional alliances. And quite a lot has been happening, really, over the past few years. You have a relatively new president, President Yoon, who has different policies from his predecessors, but also the relations with the United States, with Japan, and also with China are of utmost importance to the Republic of Korea. So please.
Okay, thank you. Again, bonjour, everyone. Nice to meet you. Again, as introduced, my name is Eunjung Lim. I'm from South Korea, not North, actually. Actually, somebody else was joking with me, and you must be part of Kim family also. It was a bad joke. I felt like, this is pretty offensive to me. But anyhow, I'm from southern part of the Korean Peninsula, and I'm teaching at one national university of the country. And this is my great honor and opportunity, pleasure to be here. And this is my ever first time to be in Caen and Normandy. But I went to the beach actually this very early in the morning because absolutely, as an international political scientist, we all know how important the Normandy landing was. And similarly, again, the Incheon landing was a game changer during the Korean War. So I see some kind of parallels between the here and my own country. So I went up there, and I'm so glad to see all of you, again, the young people, who are very serious and discussing about, again, the peace. Because today, all around the world, again, yesterday, for example, I enjoyed the plenary session a lot. But we have so many problems all around the world. Relatively speaking, my region, Northeast Asia, looks okay, even though North is like that, North Korea is still like that, but still it's pretty much under control, I hope. But these days, more and more unexpected, I will call academically emerging security issue, such as, for example, cyber attack or like space issues or whatever those deep fake crimes are really increasing seriously in Korea as well. And North Korea's cyber attacks are getting more and more increasingly sophisticated. So we have dealing with all these emerging security issues, but before I go to that more like a newer topics, let me just take this opportunity, and I'd like to highlight several blood points from my country's history because it is I think, important part of the global human history. Because Korea, again, as we all know, is divided. The peninsula is divided. And when I taught actually Korean politics in the United States, I told my American students, if you study Korean history, I think you can understand any part of the world because basically we experienced everything. Again, Korea used to be a colony of Imperial Japan, but later on we experienced a civil war, which is international war too, civil war / international war. So we fought, killed each other for 3 years, but it didn't actually solve any problem, and still the peninsula has remained divided, and a lot of tension is there. And we experienced developmental dictatorship, again, the General Park, killed many people. Of course, I do, appreciate some policy outcomes of General Park. However, at the same time, he was a brutal dictator. We can't deny the fact. So we did have at least 3 dictators, and then we experienced a 19 years long, again, the dictatorship, so-called the developmental dictatorship. Under that, of course, we accomplished industrialization, but at the same time, so many people die. So we experienced that, and we experienced the so-called bottom-up democratization. Again, this whole society was democratized by people's power, just like a French experience. And in 1987, we experienced that. But ever since then, we still, the whole society is pretty much divided, polarized, just like an American society. Part of the reason is, of course, because of the structure. Again, the presidential system easily pushes the parties into the two-polar. So we have a very polarized two-party. They never agree on anything. So we have a very polarized system, but it is deeply related to the divided situations of the peninsula. So because our nationalism, or how we see our history, how we see the future of the country, it is all related to how we see, again, the North. Of course, so-called the progressive people, which can be regarded as more ethnically nationalistic, so-called the pan-Koreanist. From their point of view, definitely North is our brother. And we have to just restore the relationship, But on the other hand, the conservative, like the current, again, the ruling party or the President Yoon, from their point of view, again, we are very different people. Again, even though ethnicity remains identical, however, as long as we vote for freedom, or we vote for the better society, or we accomplished industrialization with the blood, again, if so, we can't be that much compromisable with the other, again, the Korea, again, the North. So their view is pretty hawkish toward the North. Again, the both coexist together. We don't kill each other within the country. However, verbally or sometimes physically, we fight very, very seriously. So this is getting worse and worse, and North, their provocation is very much multi-dimensional. Again, they do have a nuclear program which is directly related to non-proliferation regime, global non-proliferation regime. And at the same time, of course, they do have a missile programs, or they do have, as I mentioned, cyber, and they are now very much close to Russia, President Putin, and they are trying to polish their space technology too, which is deeply related to the cyber technology as well. Or have you ever heard of dirty balloons? I mean, every day that's happening. Every day they send the garbages, or I don't want to even mention what was in there, but so-called dirty balloons every other day is coming. So, well, for now, I mean, it's just dirty balloons, but what if in the future, if they send us something very dangerous, I mean, within the balloon? It's a pretty sophisticated, actually, technology. I don't want to go to too much, too deep with the Middle East issue, because we are focusing on now Asia. But, Hamas's that tactics are pretty much, similar with the North, because North actually they did with the parachute or all these unconventional skills. It's tunnel too. We still, if you come to my country, you can see the tunnel, how close it was to the middle of the Seoul. So what I'm trying to say is, even though we are from the same history, same ethnic origins, or same history, we share the languages. However, what they are doing to us is becoming more and more outrageous, and we definitely need support from all around the world. ASEAN is definitely important. US is, of course, our alliance, and definitely. So having had all this, idea, current rapprochement, the rapprochement between my country and Japan is not complete yet, like a Franco-German rapprochement. I think we still have a lot of issues which can be pretty much volatile at some point. However, I want to remain optimistic as much as I can, because the new leaderships, and as you probably heard again just a few hours ago, the Japan's Liberal Democratic Party, the ruling party, they chose the Mr. Ishiba as the new president, which means he's going to be appointed as the new prime minister of Japan. But Mr. Ishiba is more like a pretty reasonable politician, so I want to remain optimistic about the Japan's leadership. But both society, I think, Korea, South Korea, and the Japanese society, we realize that, again, that this is not the time for us to fight over and over and over. Because, look at the war around the world, there are two wars literally ongoing, and there's so many difficult emerging security issues, humanitarian crisis. So again, that this is not the right time for Korea, South Korea, and Japan to fight over the past issue. So that is why I think we were able to make a kind of quasi-semi rapprochement last year. Of course, it was more like a top-down. President Yoon and the Prime Minister Kishida, basically, they really took the initiative. But I think, as I just mentioned, it can be more sustainable because of all this, external situations. Again, lastly, with the China, which is, I think, one of our main focuses. Again, PRC used to be our enemy because they crossed Yalu River and they joined the war. And if you see the armistice agreement of the Korean War, Chinese actually general commander, actually People's Volunteer Army, volunteer here, there are a lot of things actually to talk, but anyhow, time-wise, I'm gonna skip that. But anyhow, the commander of People's Volunteer Army, Peng Do-hae, he signed, and Kim, again, the North says Kim signed, and then UN commander, Clark signed. So basically, these three parties agreed on the armistice, which means, again, back then, PRC was literally our enemy. However, no, not any longer, of course, no. We have, great and very deep, extensive economic relationship. And when we are trying to deal with North Korean issue, I can't think we can solve this problem without China's support. Of course, Japan's support is necessary. Of course, Russia's understanding is necessary. America's support mandatory. However, again, the China is really key player who should make a better efforts, I think, in the solving the North Korea problem. Again, even though the U.S.-China strategic rivalry is going on, we understand where this is from, and I think it's gonna take a while because it is basically about the future technology. It is not literally a war, but it is more about hegemony surrounding the future technology. So the US-China rivalry, I think it will continue for a while. However, at the same time, I want to see more dialogues, absolutely, between Seoul and Beijing, or between the Beijing and Tokyo, or between the Beijing and Pyongyang even, or Beijing and then Washington too, because we do have a real threat in the peninsula, and without peace in the Korean peninsula, I can't think we can see the real peace in the Northeast Asia. And if we don't see real peace in the Northeast Asia as a whole, it cannot be peaceful. So please, pay more attention to my region too. And I'm looking forward to the further discussion with other panelists and with you too. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Eunjung. So it's really a chance to hear, about these parts of the world, which, again, we don't cover well enough in this country, even though, unless you're very specialized. But thank you for this very the big picture and historical details about the Korean Peninsula. And I'm now turning to Bates Gill, and who is going to wrap up this panel, this regional panel. Of course, we'll come back with more questions, but obviously there's one thing, Bates, that I would like perhaps you to refer to, is the fact we've got US elections coming in about a month, 5 weeks, and this will have an impact. In fact, the US elections, as we know, there was a panel on the US yesterday, will have a worldwide impact. But perhaps you could tell us first how you see the state of alliances in Asia, in this region, but also what the role for the United States and how important the region is for United States in this region, which we now call the Indo-Pacific.
Merci bien, Philippe. C'est un plaisir, c'est un honneur d'être ici.
Thank you, Philippe. It's an honor, a pleasure to be here. It's my first time here in Normandy, even though my ancestors
Normandie.
were from Normandy a long time ago.
Mais merci bien.
But thank you very much, Philippe. Thank you to the forum to give me the opportunity to talk with you today. Thank you very much. But I think it's better now to continue in English.
So my role, as Philippe said, is to try to offer one American's point of view on the issue of alliances, security, and peace in Asia. In my view, we are in an increasingly difficult, increasingly tense, and in that sense, quite crucial turning point for U.S. relations and alliances in the Indo-Pacific, all of which I think in mostly negative ways affect the prospects for peace and security in the Indo-Pacific for the coming era. I want to talk about three important issues that I think define this turning point. First, as has already been mentioned, quite seriously rising concerns, certainly within the United States and amongst American allies and friends in the Indo-Pacific, rising concerns about China, but increasingly also about Russia and North Korea, and interestingly, deepening cooperation amongst the three of them together at political, economic, and importantly, military areas. This raises many new concerns and tensions into the U.S. alliance system, with rising expectations on U.S. allies in the region, such as the Philippines, such as Japan, such as South Korea, to work more closely with the United States and other friendly countries and partners to try and counterbalance what has become an increasingly challenging environment, and especially in terms of China's more proactive, often quite even hostile activities in the region. Of particular concern, as we've already heard, are China's rising ambitions in the South China Sea, across the Taiwan Strait, vis-a-vis the democratic island and self-governing island of Taiwan, and also its growing nuclear capabilities, both of China and as Professor Lim already mentioned, also that of North Korea. So, point one, these countries of the region, like China and North Korea, but also partnering with others like Russia, are becoming an increasing challenge and threat to the interests and values of the United States, as well as its partners in the region. Just a quick aside about alliances, if I may, Philippe. What do we mean by alliance? The word gets used a lot. And my view of what an alliance is a treaty-based formal agreement between two or more states to assist one another in defense, primarily, in case of a war or a conflict were to break out. The United States has such treaties with Japan, with South Korea, with the Philippines, and Thailand, and Australia in the Indo-Pacific, as of course the United States does, as you all well know, under the NATO arrangements. So that's what I'm talking about when I speak about alliances. So that's the first point. The U.S. alliance system is coming under increasing pressure from these outside forces as China, North Korea, and others pursue their interests in the region. Secondly, what's been the response by the United States and its allies and other security-related partners? First, a much more proactive effort to deepen and strengthen those critical bilateral alliances that I just mentioned, those 5 important bilateral alliances of the United States in the Indo-Pacific. But second, in addition, efforts are underway to establish new forms of partnerships, not formal alliances, but nevertheless new forms of partnerships which create additional defense and military-related counterbalancing toward China and even North Korea. What am I talking about? Maybe many of you have heard about the Australia, United Kingdom, United States agreement, so-called AUKUS, A-U-K-U-S, which is primarily an undertaking to deepen defense technology cooperation across those 3 countries. It's going to have its largest impact in the defense-related dynamics within the Indo-Pacific region. The United States has brokered a deepening of cooperation amongst the 3 partners, United States, Japan, and South Korea, in a courageous, I think, politically courageous undertaking by the leaders of South Korea and Japan to try and overcome their historical and other political differences so that the 3, United States, Japan, and South Korea, can work more closely with one another across a range of issues. And not just it's not just US-led efforts. Other allies are beginning to work more closely with one another without the United States around defense technology and training and joint exercises. So Japan and the Philippines, for example, Australia and the Philippines, Australia and Japan, all working more closely together. So US officials like to refer to this undertaking as a lattice, or en français, a tria. Tria? Tria?
Un trio.
So an interweaving of the various partnerships across the region, which in theory will make those partnerships more powerful and more effective. So these are 2 interesting dynamics, right? On the one hand, you have, as I just mentioned, a more ambitious and proactive China and North Korea seeking to alter the security dynamic in the region to push back against the United States and its allies. But on the other hand, you have the United States and its allies also working to counterbalance that. You know, that may not be a recipe for peace in the future. Both sides see this as an effort to deter the other. And of course, that can lead to conflict if it's not properly managed going forward. Now, the third important issue that I think creates a turning point or a crucial pivot moment for the region, of course, is what Philippe has already mentioned, and that's the upcoming U.S. Election. I don't think we can predict with a lot of certainty of what the outcome is going to be. It is going to be extremely close outcome. It will definitely involve that odd mechanism of American electoral politics known as the Electoral College. It may result in a situation where one of the candidates will win a majority of the vote, but will not win the election. Something similar to what happened in 2016 when President Trump was victorious, even though he did not have the majority of the people's votes. So I can't predict what will happen, but at best, as analysts trying to understand the future, we can try to think about what one administration versus the other might do. In the case of the Trump team, maybe it's somewhat easier. I guess in both cases, it's somewhat easier as an analyst to predict because we've seen both of them in action. We have a pretty good idea of what their policies have already been, and we can assume they will be similar going forward. A Trump administration, though, I think is still somewhat uncertain. Even within the Trump team, within the Trump, those persons who we believe will be the senior most important advisors to President Trump, there are deep divides about relationships with American allies and the degree to which the United States should continue to play this major security role internationally, whether that's in Europe or in the Indo-Pacific. So it's a little bit hard to predict, but I think one thing for sure when it comes to alliances is that alliance partners more will be asked of them. More will be asked of them, both in terms of financial commitments to their own defense, but also to do more to push back and help the United States defend its interests in the region. A Harris administration is also likely, I think, to be hawkish toward China, continuing what President Biden has been pursuing, not only in terms of trying to strengthen alliance relationships in the region, but also delivering more punitive measures against China, economically speaking, as a tool to try and assure that China's military industrial power does not too rapidly grow, counter to American interests. Again, I think a Harris administration will also make demands upon its allies in the region and have quite high expectations that they take similar measures to try and counterbalance China. So either way, I think American allies in the region will find that the next administration will be making greater demands upon them, especially in terms of their relationship with China and towards North Korea. For me, then, it all adds up to seeing increasing tensions in the region. I do not see a likelihood that U.S.-China relations will improve significantly in the coming years, no matter who is president. And, of course, around certain quite volatile issues, like across the Taiwan Strait, the possibility of confrontation and possibly even conflict, I think, are as high for this region, especially in terms of U.S.-China relations, as they've been in 50 or 60 years or more. I think the real question then is the degree to which the two sides can manage their relationship. Yes, both are going to make an effort to deter the other, but I think it's going to require an enormously more skillful and careful strategic approach by both China and the United States and their partners in the region to make sure that we avoid the worst outcomes for this region.
Thank you very much, Bates. I suggest if you have questions, you can start raising your hands and we can have a first round of questions. If not, I have plenty of questions. But let's get started, maybe this gentleman here. Can we have a mic, please? No, it's better because it's all been recorded, so just hold on.
Good afternoon. I should...
Close to the microphone, please. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your presentations. I have a pretty simple question about the region, Southeast Asia. Sorry, I should present myself. I'm a student in a master's degree in global diplomacy, so I'm really interested in those questions. So I would like to know a little bit more about the ASEAN countries. Are they going to join maybe AUKUS and all the alliance, or are they not, because of the tied-up relation with China? Or, and also, I have another question, really different, for you professors, about the demographic, the influence of demography in the relation in the region. Because I know it's a basic question, but it's really important, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Delia, would you like to take the first question?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Now, AUKUS was really a Australian, US, UK partnership or agreement where the Australians are working on the transfer of nuclear technology on nuclear-powered submarines. Not nuclear power, but nuclear-powered submarines. Now, the Philippines doesn't have submarines of that level, and I don't think we will be part of AUKUS. Although AUKUS has an impact on the current situation because we have a treaty agreement with the US and we have a treaty agreement with Australia. And we have a very strong agreement, defense cooperation agreement with Australia. So that's on AUKUS. You may be interested that there's another important group that is actively working in the region, is the Quad. It's Japan, the US, Australia, and India. And it's very interesting because I just came from India to visit the Dalai Lama, and it's wonderful to see how a man like him talks about peace and how positive he is about peace and all that. But at the same time, India has a very strong stake in the region, in the same way that they have a border problem with China in the northern part. India looks at us as a friendly country because we have very good economic relations with India. So Quad has some kind of influence in terms of their participation with ASEAN. But ASEAN is not a member of Quad, it's not a member of AUKUS. But we were referring earlier to Indo-Pacific. The Indo-Pacific concept was brought about by a desire to link, mainly economically, the countries from Japan all the way to India. This is a very interesting development because in the early days, India was not part of the equation. But now it is, and because it has strong relations with ASEAN, we have a kind of a defense cooperation agreement with them. And so we are all interested to see how this partnership under the Indo-Pacific arrangement is concerned. Although the Indo-Pacific concept, in the beginning, ASEAN was ambivalent about it. We were not sure where it was going. I think it's work in progress, and but there are 4 pillars. There's cooperation. There is flexibility in terms of how the cooperation will go about, and so one has to watch how this Indo-Pacific concept will evolve in terms of the participation of ASEAN. So more and more, as you watch every day, you will see an evolution of this kind of partnership of the Indo-Pacific area, because people say that the Asia is, if you look at the water content of Asia, it's a lot of maritime relationship that keeps us together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We would like to take the question on the weight of demographics. Eunjung?
And thank you for the wonderful questions. And if I may, I'd like to have make a quick comments about AUKUS, because my suggestion to my government or to my society is we need to join, actually, to AUKUS as well, for the pillar 2. Not, of course, nuclear power submarine we are very much interested in. However, the enrichment issue remains. It takes another hours, so I'm going to skip all those explanations. But absolutely, we are interested in having a nuclear powered, not again nuclear armed submarine. But rather than that, we are. I think my suggestion is we need to join the pillar 2 of AUKUS. Against all these emerging security issues like cyber, space, deep ocean, all the things. So, but I'm not representing my whole country. It is pretty, again, the polarized society. We have different views about those kind of minilateralism or minilateral framework like AUKUS or Quad. Again, there are many different views about it. And demographic issue, that is fantastic. That's a very sharp question because Korea's population is shrinking, and the speed is the fastest because our birth rate is approximately 1.7. So it's the lowest in the world. So it is shrinking pretty rapidly. Japan is already shrinking. So Japan, like country, again, I'm not representing Japan either, but I spent many years in Japan and I studied and worked over there. But many of my Korean fellow citizens, they are worried about remilitarization of Japan, because we have a traumatic, memories about the fascist imperial Japan. However, because of the demographic issues, I can't think again that Japan can be another very offensive player in the region, because again, simply self-defense force is difficult to fill the whole vacancy. Korea too. Our military used to be, we had 600,000, which was the number we have been pretty much proud and confident with for years and years, but not any longer. It's hard to maintain. So my probably suggestion will be just robotization, AI, all the things should be adopted quickly and extensively, because China way, way fast with all this robotization, automation, or even modernization of the military. That might be my answer to the gentleman's question.
Thank you so much. I have a quick question for you, Bates, if I may. China has been, the elephant in the room in this conversation, and you're a China expert, very experienced. I'm just wondering, when you list all these alliances that there are in the region, is it an excuse for China to react and to say, look, we have all these enemies, we have 14 countries along our borders, we live in a very dangerous world, and all these countries, they are against us. And this is a message that you've written a book on this, that the Chinese Communist Party is probably throwing at people to say, look, we need to rally and do you think perhaps these alliances can be somewhat counterproductive because they are raising the stakes and making China either more paranoid or more nationalistic, perhaps?
Yeah. I recall the statement, I think it was attributed to Henry Kissinger, who said, even paranoids have real enemies. And so I think it's a mix of reactions on China's part. Yes, it's an effective instrument of an authoritarian government to instill greater nationalistic pride and even some fear as a way of maintaining some solidarity of population. But at the same time, I also believe that it's not simply a political sort of tactic. The leadership in China today has very serious global ambitions to be a much more powerful, more well-respected, more wealthy, and influential player in the international system. In that it is no different from all the rising powers that the students here have studied over the centuries. Rising powers seek to have a bigger say in how the world works. So the question is, can the international system as it currently exists accommodate in a stable and secure way the ambitions and expectations and dreams that the Chinese leadership and Chinese people have and believe they deserve to achieve. So the answer is, how then does the international system, or in particular for the purposes of this panel, the US-led alliance system, manage that, right? I will say this, Philippe, I think probably there's lots of reasons for this, but I think there tends to be a default to a military answer, right? How do we counterbalance and manage China's rise? A lot of governments reach for the military toolbox. There are a lot of reasons for that. It's often quite effective. It is well-funded and can be relatively quickly introduced, whereas political solutions can be very, very difficult to work out, if not impossible. So I think we are at risk, we are definitely at risk of trying to manage the future relationship with China primarily through military instruments. I think that's probably not a smart way to go about it, and really raises the risk of sort of self-fulfilling outcomes as the two sort of forces increasingly fear the other.
Well, since this is the Normandy Forum for Peace, we're lucky to have reasonable people at this forum who are not warmongers, and reasonable people around this table. So are there more questions? Please feel to raise your hand, and you can ask in French as well. We just have to warn the panelists, they need to put their headsets on if you're going to speak in French. And please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
En fait, j'avais une question à propos.
Good afternoon. I have a question on the relationship between South Korea and Japan, because Ms. Lim said that the relationship between Japan and China was improving, but I only see the improvement through K-pop and industrialization. So I can't see if there is a true. I can see how that improvement is going. How are things improving also between Korea and Japan? Apart from K-pop, we hadn't talked about.
Well, these young people, I'm sure, know Korea through K-pop, and I think it's fair enough.
Yeah.
But please, Eunjung.
Yes, BTS is. How can I say? I mean, their
Closer, please, the mic.
Oh yeah, their contribution is huge. Yeah, of course, the cultural impact it was pretty great, even to the relationship between the Korea and Japan, because Japanese young generation, they have a lot of all this affections to the Korean culture too. The generational transition, I think it is a pretty big key, which is related to the demography issue too, because I went to Japan in 1997, right after I graduated from my high school. Back then, Korea was okay. It was not that super poor country. However, still, relatively speaking, Japan was like this. Literally, all infrastructure, services, public services, all the things. So I did have some kind of wow, Japan is like this. It's much more, how would you say, everything is more convenient, more advanced, But these days, my students, they don't think so. They don't have any that kind of mentality about Japan, because they are so comfortable with living in Korea, because Korea, everything is so fast, convenient, safe, even though North is threatening us all the time. Balloons are coming, but still relatively speaking, very safe society. So they, and even, if you compare the purchasing power parity GDP, South Korea's purchasing power parity actually went up there. I mean, it's higher than even Japan. So what I'm trying to say is all this mentality has changed pretty dramatically over the generations. So as you just pointed out, beyond the just culture, how would you say, those familiarity or affection, what do we have? That's actually a fundamental question. Of course, the leaderships are trying to push forward, but there are still, of course, a lot of backlash from the South Korean, more like a progressive people too. But I want to remain more optimistic, because my, student-like generation, young generation in Korea, they have a pretty different view about Japan, and they feel more probably comfortable in communicating with their Japanese counterpart or friends, because they don't have any that kind of complex, and they feel like closer because we do have common senses. We do share common senses. That's a big part. As someone will probably describe that as a cultural thing. The behaviorism, if you think about all this behavior, Japanese and Koreans are much more similar than any other probably group in the world. So in that sense, I'll see it will take time. However, I think I will certainly expect some more progress. Economically too, it was more like a hierarchical back then, but it's more like a equal now, and it's more like a complementary. So Korean company, Japanese companies are trying to make, for example, like a consortium-like relationship. They are very much interested in ASEAN, definitely. So all this, partnership, they can reach out to the third region, I think. Okay, I hope I answered, to your question properly.
That was great. Thank you so much. And it brings back to me a question I wanted to ask Delia, if I may. You're a great advocate for ASEAN, obviously, having served that as the Director General. But I'm just wondering, from a European point of view and from the EU's experience, we haven't spoken too much about Europe here, but that's not the purpose of this panel. But do you think one day Southeast Asians can expect to have an organization that will remotely look like the European Union?
Yeah, when ASEAN was born in 1967, there was a move to look at models for regional cooperation. And certainly, we looked at the EU as a model for a group of countries to work together. After looking closely into what Europe is more integrated culturally. ASEAN is so diverse, and in the beginning, we really didn't know each other very well. Each one of us had a different history. We were an American colony, or before that, a Spanish colony. The Indonesians were a Dutch colony. The Vietnamese, Laos, Cambodia were French colonies. Of course, Thailand is very lucky to have had a very strong monarchy that kept away all the others from conquering Thailand. So historically, we have such diverse backgrounds. So when we looked at the EU and looked at the word integration, from 1967 to 1992, we were not able to use the word integration. Integration means giving up quite a bit of your political system, economic system, and we were not prepared for the longest time. The first time we thought of integration was 1992 when we made our ASEAN Free Trade Area in order to strengthen our bargaining position vis-à-vis other countries that we were dealing with. Insofar as coming out with an EU model where you have Brussels, we don't have a Brussels. Most of the decisions are taken nationally and put together. We only have a secretariat in Jakarta. But the real power really remains in the leadership from these countries who work together, and this is what makes people a little bit impatient, because you have to get consensus from all of these 10 member countries. Last week, we had a meeting of ASEAN former foreign ministers, and we were looking at how do you strengthen the ASEAN process. I said, well, you know, you don't have an EU passport. I don't think we ever will have, perhaps. Although we compromise, we have an ASEAN lane in each of our immigration offices, which facilitates the travel of a Thai to the Philippines or from Indonesia to Malaysia. And then the second thing that we did was to offer 30 days visa-free for all of us. So it's a work in progress. And I said, you know, in some time ago, I don't know, I saw a product made in Europe. So we said, oh, perhaps we should have made in ASEAN so that we will have a trademark. But people had reservations about it. So that is the situation with ASEAN. But politically, I think we are quite working well together, although we have what you call a very interesting compromise in our economic negotiations. If everybody does not agree, we will say, all right, 10 minus X, meaning 1 or 2 does not agree, but to give the flavor or the kind of impression that we are together, we say 10 minus X. We don't know who that X would be. But it's really a lesson in how to accommodate each other.
Sounds like a good idea for the EU. Because there are 1 or 2 people, personally, I wouldn't mind living outside sometimes. No names here.
As I said in one of my discourse when I was coordinator of ASEAN EU, we want to learn from the mistakes of the EU. So perhaps that's one way to do it.
Absolutely. Are there more questions? Please raise your hands. English, French, yes, sir. 1 and 2. Why don't we take the two of them, one after the other?
Bonjour.
Good afternoon.
Il a été posé la question par rapport à l'Union.
There was a question. There was the question regarding the European Union regarding ASEAN. I was wondering whether, in the long term, there might be an organization like NATO that could be possible between Japan, Australia, the United States, and the ASEAN country. So something similar to NATO.
My question will be in English. I was wondering if there was a will for the ASEAN to try to expand, or is it just trying to stay within these 10 countries?
Right. Who wants to take the first question? Bates, yeah?
If I understood correctly, a question about...
You need the mic. Sorry, you need the mic.
If I understood the question correctly, it was related to the expanding or strengthening relationship between NATO and partners in the Indo-Pacific region, such as Japan. Well, as you would know, there already is underway an effort to try and create more regularized, more formalized interactions and ties between Indo-Pacific partners and NATO. I think we've just seen the third year in a row, was it, Philippe, that the leaders of Australia, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand participated,
Yes.
right?
As guests.
As guests, observers, or there's a more formal name for their participation in the annual leadership summit. So, that's a big step. I mean, you consider NATO's 70 years old. It took them this long to create that type of relationship with other, significant partners.
But perhaps part of the question was, I mean, this is also, an issue which people in China have been talking about. Is NATO going to expand towards Asia as a sort of global security organization, or will there be an Asian NATO or something like this?
I think we can take that in two parts. The answer to the first one is NATO going to expand to Asia? The answer is no. I highly, highly, highly doubt it. But the second question is, will we see a kind of NATO emerge in the Indo-Pacific region? Again, I think the answer to that is probably not. It is a rhetorical instrument that China likes to use in order to vilify, to demonize NATO, or more broadly, to demonize the US-led alliance system more generally, precisely because it does pose a problem for China's ambitions in East Asia. But I think it's unlikely. NATO is a quite remarkable organization, born of a quite unique history, and has probably what is one of the most significant sets of mutual defense commitments of any treaty, certainly today and maybe even in history. To replicate that, in other words, think of this, an attack on South Korea or an attack on Japan means South Korea will come to Japan's defense. Don't think so.
I'd love to hear Eunjung's view on this.
Yes, even though we more and more increasingly appreciate or recognize the necessity of security cooperation with like-minded countries, including Japan, Australia, or even New Zealand, or ASEAN, or even NATO. However, that does not necessarily mean that we need to have a former, as you just, Mr. Gates, Dr. Gill, I'm sorry. As Dr. Gill pointed out, alliance is more based on the real treaty, written word with the signature. between Korea and Japan is very difficult. It's very difficult. However, I think we can deepen the security-related cooperation in many different ways and in many different levels. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have a former alliance. I don't think so either. Yes.
And to the ambassador, what about expansion of ASEAN to new members?
Thank you for reminding me. Actually, for some years now, East Timor has applied for membership in ASEAN. However, there are stages where we think they should learn how to become a member, or if they qualify in terms of responsibilities that they should take in ASEAN. At the last summit meeting in Jakarta last year, East Timor was accepted as a full-time observer. There is reason to believe that perhaps next year, when Malaysia takes over as chair, there may be a chance that East Timor becomes the 11th member of ASEAN. But the first official picture that where East Timor appeared, you know, this usual picture of the gentlemen and ladies holding hands, was in the summit meeting in Jakarta last year. And it takes quite a bit of responsibility because you must have enough people to attend all the meetings of ASEAN. You must have the capacity to participate in the activities of ASEAN. However, we would like, the Philippines is one of the countries that would like East Timor to be in. We have had very good relationship with East Timor, especially during the war they had, and East Timor is a Christian country, and they had asked for help from the Philippines because it's a Christian country. So there is some kind of link there. But certainly we will see 11 soon. But how soon? Perhaps next year when Malaysia takes over as chairman.
And meanwhile, there are problems with Myanmar, which is in but sometimes out. You were talking about members occasionally being put on the side. All right, perhaps, is there any more question? Perhaps to conclude, I would like each of you to say a few words about how you see the impact. Bates has already mentioned that, but how you see the impact of the US elections, whether it's Harris or Trump. How would it, what impact would it have on the region? Starting perhaps with you, Dr. Lim.
This is a crucial election. Of course, any American presidential election is important to the rest of the world, but this specific election, its impact is going to be huge to the peninsula as well, because Kim Jong-un might be waiting for Mr. Trump's coming back to the White House. But we do have both views, and some group of us want to see more like a sustainability or path dependent to gain the stability, whereas some others are looking for any chance to bring some changes, right, to the stalemate-like situations. Well, but overall, as I mentioned during my remark, I think I'm pretty optimistic about at least the relationship between the South Korea and Japan. With the new leadership, I can be more optimistic. And in general, as far as we share some value and we share some common senses, I think we can work together with Japan and many other like-minded countries in the Indo-Pacific region. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador, same question.
Your question reminded me of the visit of Kamala Harris to the Philippines. She was in the Philippines recently, and she wanted to see what the problem was, and she stood in an island that was right across another island which China was claiming. So based on the policy statements of President Biden, the word ironclad, I don't know how you translate that in French. Ironclad. If you look at the policy statements of Biden and Kamala Harris, when she came to the Philippines, she repeated the same words of the Philippines' relationship with the United States based on the 1951 treaty agreement. It was one of the first important treaties we have signed with the United States. The relationship is ironclad. So we have not heard what Mr. Trump has in mind in terms of his policy vis-a-vis Asia. I may have missed it, but I have not seen a strong statement on his policy vis-a-vis Asia. But what I know and what I'm aware of is the strong statement from Kamala Harris on the position of the Democratic Party on the relationship with the Philippines.
Thank you. And Bates, same question. I mean, I know you have to.
Just, yeah,
it's tough, but what does Trump think about Asia?
Right. Well, just very quickly, I think you can boil it down quickly that the future of the alliance system and the traditional ways of the United States has tried to work with them would likely to be sustained and promoted under a Harris administration. President Trump has already shown us from his previous 4 years in office that he's going to be much more transactional and I think we can be less certain about what those relationships might be.
Thank you so much, all three of you, and thank you for your questions.